Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be talking about Ukraine and Putin and the United States and the CIA and the Nazis and everything else that's going on in this world. So this is another episode of Vodka Wars, and I just wanted to mention, please subscribe to all the channels that I have in the description box. There are 3 YouTube channels that I want you to subscribe to: Rumble, Brighteon, and Bitchute. So please subscribe. And also, please go to my store and get the supplements that I offer to help boost your immune system, to help to reduce aging, to move in a path of wellness and fitness. So what we're going to be talking about in this episode is what has been transpiring today, or the last maybe 48 hours. So this recording is on 26th. Yeah, the 26th. So what has happened? What has transpired in Ukraine? All right. So Putin's advance has slowed down. All right. It's been slowing down. It's been going down. Why has it been going down? It's been going down because the Ukrainian people are actually fighting. This is a perfect example of what did not happen in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the people didn't want to fight. Here, you have people that do want to fight. And the important thing here is that even though only about I think about a third of the troops have moved into Ukraine from Russia, you have groups within Ukraine, and Ukraine's a big country, where it's going to be more like guerrilla warfare. All right, and especially when they move into the cities, and I'll bring that up with the whole bioweapon thing and how that plays out. So Putin's advancements have been slowing down. Part of the reason is because they're fighting, and they're pushing back. And I don't think that Putin thought that the Ukrainians would fight back as hard. I don't think the NATO forces or the president of the United States thought that the Ukrainians were going to fight as hard. And the president of the United States wanted the president of Ukraine to leave the country, all right? And it almost seems as if the United States wants Ukraine not to succeed, okay? Now, this opens up a more important point here. Why is that happening? All right. Why do they want Ukraine to fall, or at least be in a perpetual state of war? One, arms sales. The longer it is, and the more kind of Cold War-esque it is, it's money for the war machine. There seems to be a desire within the order to have America go down. All right. So they want the U.S. The order wants the U.S. The order. These are the order. They're the ones that are pulling the strings. They want the U.S. to go down, the USA to go down, China to go up. All right. They want a 21st century China. Now, with the 21st century China, it's a whole different ballgame of what the change in architecture of the world and the finance of money, the hegemonic power and all that. If you use a two-front war, it increases the chances of the United States being overextended. and it improves the chances of China in the 21st century. So that might be part of the reason why they want a war in Ukraine. Another thing is that there seems to be oil. There seems to be a connection between oil and biologics. Biologics, oil and biologics. Why is that? Why do I say that? You look at these countries that are popping up in the news. And you're hearing, Ukraine, there's a lot of oil going through the country, all right? And that means big energy companies and investments, all right? Now, there was a case that was reported in Kazakhstan of and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but the report was saying that rebel forces took over in the beginning of the year this lab in Kazakhstan, this biological lab that was supposedly a military-run biological lab that was joint effort with the Chinese, Russians, and the United States. I don't know if that's true or not, but I find it odd, all right? And when we're talking about these countries, there's pipelines and energy flows that are tied to them. So if there's some sort of instability in the world through biologics, then price of oil will go up. And that instability and war will push away the whole green agenda and maintain some sort of petrodollar dominance. So there is kind of like this incentive to keep the petrodollar alive, the oil dollar alive. So that might be a part of it. Now, in terms of Kazakhstan, that was around early January 2022, right? Well, we heard in January, near the end of January, like 25th or something like that, 2022, about something new, okay? Right? We had this, in early January, there was the lab takeover in Kazakhstan. There was the paper that came out by China. And what was that about? That was about Neocove. Now, what's Neocove? Neocove is a modified MERS. Okay. Kazakhstan is kind of near that peripheral edge between the Middle East and Europe and Russia. All right. If you want to, it's kind of that zone, that peripheral zone of the Middle East. Okay. It's a stand country, right? Like Afghanistan, all right, Kazakhstan. So they end up getting a lab, and something happened there. Something was being made. And then all of a sudden a paper comes out from China that's about Neocove. And they're saying, oh, if there's just this new mutation that happens to happen, then there's going to be this huge outbreak where there's going to be about 35 lethality. All right, well, that might have been the cover story to warn the public that the lab that was taken over in Kazakhstan had MERS. And it plays in what I was saying about Syria and that they were going to drop something in the Middle East to create havoc and to try to circumvent Russia. Now, someone would say, if this lab in Kazakhstan was run by the Russians, the Chinese, and the United States, why would they be doing joint development with MERS? Well, I think that it's the same thing that was going on with SARS-CoV-2. There was this joint development with the P4 lab and with Barrick's lab in North Carolina. I still believe that MERS, SARS, and SARS-CoV-2, the deadly version of MERS, is coming right out of Barrick's lab, and that that research also is in tandem with other labs around the world. But the head guy is Barrick. That's my gut feeling. He's done research on myocarditis, and he's done research on water systems, pathogens in water systems. It would not surprise me that there is something that's going to happen with water and pathogens, like viruses. So, George Webb has been really focused on the aerosolization of things, and respiratory infections and stuff like that are, perfect for using some sort of aerosolized system. But Barrick also was playing around with water. He did a lot of research about water. And I think water is going to be an important feature of the next biologic. Now, what that means, I don't know. But I think I'm just looking at the metadata, and water keeps on popping up. MERS keeps on popping up. New influenza-like viruses keeps on popping up, like swine flu and avian flu. Other things that are popping are like hemorrhagic virus type pathogens. So blood, water, and respiratory. Okay, so my working hypothesis is this. Something happened in Kazakhstan. What happened, I don't know. And that there needed to be a cover story to pop up with NeoCove. NeoCove is real, and I think that it's a lot worse than what was published. I think that what was published is just the tip of the iceberg of what's actually out there. They're saying that if a mutation took place and they made the mutation in the lab, what they have in the lab is way more than what they published. Okay? So that's just, what's seen, above the waterline, but what's below the waterline is what's in the labs. And I think they were opening up the cover story for NeoCove. And it may be related to Kazakhstan because you're talking about only about 20 days difference. That's my understanding of what happened, all right? There's some people saying it didn't happen, or some people saying it did. There are a lot of biological labs in Ukraine, all right? There's reports that Putin has knocked out 8 labs. I don't know if it's 8. It wouldn't surprise me if 1 or 2 were knocked out, but I don't know if all 8 were knocked out. There are few that are on the east side, and there are some on the western side of Ukraine. Now, it wouldn't surprise me that a couple were taken down or capture or whatever. Now, if you, on the registry for the BSL-4 labs, Ukraine doesn't have one. The nearest one, the nearest three are one in the middle of Belarus, one in Russia, and one in Hungary. Those are the three closest in this war in Ukraine. It's the Hungarian lab, the Belarus lab, and the Russian lab. So two of them are Russian related. One is NATO related. That's based on the registry. You can easily look it up on the internet, map of BSL-4 labs. So there's 3 nearby BSL-4 labs in this region, okay? There are biological labs, many of them in the Ukraine, but they're not BSL-4, all right? That's based on the registry. It doesn't surprise me that they may be doing something that's covert. That opens up a whole new set, but we can only work with hypothesis and data-driven hypothesis. All right, so we're trying to form hypotheses that are data-driven. What we can confirm, there are BSL-4 labs in Hungary, in Belarus, and in Russia. That's a fact in that region. There are biological labs of lesser degree, most likely a BSL-2 or BSL-3, that are in Ukraine, all right? And there may have been some covert activities that are BSL-4 related in one of these labs in Ukraine, all right? And it just so happens that there are about 3 or so that are close to the border to Russia, all right? So it is not out of the realm of possibility that the CIA was planning to release biologics, a bioweapon. I think the CIA was working on a weapons program to bring down potentially the Russians and the Chinese. And this is the hint that Putin states during the early days of COVID. Maybe it's not the early, maybe within mid 2020, where he states that COVID could be changing the world order in terms of national security for countries. And I think he intuitively, or maybe he knew, because he had insider information, that this was not by accident, but was orchestrated. Now, there are many different theories on what exactly happened, and they are theories. There's no concrete proof. I have a certain, line of thinking based on data points, based on some evidence that leads me thinking a certain way. But I hold the thought that Russia, China, United States, Israel, and the UK and other countries, but those are the big ones, that they have a biological program going on that is tied to weapon systems. And those biological weapon systems or bioweapons are dealing with pathogens that are bacterial and viral, maybe even fungal, right, and parasitic, but they are tied to a weapons development. And the big thing that we've been seeing is viruses, right? But you could have parasites developed in such a way that it circumvents the immune system if they're bred a certain way, right, or mutated a certain way. genetically modified in a certain way that are water related. And this goes back to what I was saying about Barrick and water. So we got to get our mind more broader, that it's not just about viruses. It's about parasites. It's also about funguses. There's a plethora of weapon systems being developed. Okay, so, and Putin, I think, saw this happening, and most likely the United States is more advanced than the other countries in this regard. Now, CIA, I think, wanted to take down President Xi, and I think the release was from the United States through the P4. You know, and then there was 2 other releases that were happening a little bit before that. Now, who did what, I'm not really sure. Now, okay, so Ukraine. In the CIA, parts of the order, see, it's important to mention that it's the CIA, there's factions within them, the black hats and the white hats. The black hats are part of the order. And they want the fall of the US and the increase in China. There's the white hats that are pro-US and want the opposite. There's something fighting in the CIA. Okay. Now, I want to I know this kind of looks discombobulated, but the thing here is that the Ukraine war is not so clear why it's happening. Is it happening because Putin is just wants more territory and feels threatened and needs a buffer? Plus, there is history of Ukraine being Russian and all this stuff. Or is it something deeper, like money, a war machine, some sort of him working with the new order, the order? Biden or whoever is controlling Biden working for the order, and that there's going to be the fall of the United States and the rise of China. And there are people within some of these organizations that are trying to fight it. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. There's definitely a connection that seems to be with oil and biologics. The use of MERS in the Middle East, it's oil related, it's oil driven. The control of the island chains is not just a strategic and cultural issue with the Chinese, it's also control of natural resources like natural gas. So, SARS-CoV-2, P4, the advancement in Taiwan, that's an oil play too. That's an energy play. China's getting their energy from Russia now with their deal. So there's money to be made in oil. And that with a Chinese, a 21st century centric China policy means a weakening of the petrodollar. Now, the black hats from the CIA and the order would want that. They want the destruction of the petrodollar. Okay, so let's take that kind of thought and expand on it. Okay, so we keep on hearing in the news about SWIFT. SWIFT is the payment system, international payment system, it's a clearing. There's also a central bank. A central bank. Each country has their own central bank, right? Okay. Now, we are hearing in the news that there's going to be sanctions against Russia on SWIFT. And we're hearing in the news that there's going to be sanctions against Russia with their central bank. some of the, and there's other sanctions with companies, you know, and seizing assets and stuff. If you look at some big players that are affected in Ukraine and who would be affected by the sanctions with Russia, a lot of them, it's oil companies. And they're Western oil companies. So oil companies are going to hurt. They're going to go down a little bit. There are manufacturing companies like Rolls-Royce that may be affected. There are Japanese companies that are affected. So there are lots of banks too, the banking industry, manufacturing. They're going to go down. So these are some big players through the sanctions, the regular sanctions. Now, by cutting off Russia and trying to box in their central bank, what's going to happen is that Putin is going to start leveraging his gold. All right, Putin's going to leverage his gold, and that's going to be the base of his currency. And he's going to have exports increase to China. And it's going to be priced not in petrodollars. It's going to be priced in rubles. All right. So there is a market for Putin by shifting from Europe to China. And that China, as is expanding in smaller markets with this whole, you know, Silk Road thing, they're going to start trying to price activity in the Chinese yuan. So we're going to see the US dollar as a currency, world currency, to start going down. Because the United States would prefer to be pricing transactions, global transactions in US dollars, especially oil, while the Chinese and the Russians are going to price in a different type of currency. Now, when that happens, you know, the world is going to be smaller for Putin. He won't be able to expand in a lot of different markets. And there's going to be internal pressure as it whittles them down. Now, we have said that these sanctions, especially the semiconductor manufacturers, we're going to cut them off on their chips. Well, if Taiwan is controlled by China, then the chip manufacturing can still get to Putin. So Taiwan is going to be a key point for the manufacturing, the chip manufacturing. Right? And that's going to be a flashpoint. Taiwan's going to be a flashpoint to see if the military can still maintain its prowess with resupplying with high-tech chips. If that's cut off, then you're going to slowly atrophy Russia. All right. China knows that they need a strong partner to fight the United States and keep a two-front war happening. So China is going to help support Russia. the best they can. All right. So with that in mind, I would say that we're going to see a strengthening of forces between the Chinese and the Russians, and this desire from China to maintain a two-front war to keep the United States off balance. Because if we could just focus on Asia, it's a lot harder for China. But if we have to focus in Europe and Asia, then it's a lot easier for China to take over Taiwan. So with that in mind, we kind of see, if the black hats want to weaken the United States, then maintain this two-front war. And if this two-front war is maintained, weakening the US, weakening the dollar, and therefore kind of like a slow deterioration like we see with Britain right after World War I. World War I was basically the nail in the coffin, leading to the permanent decline of the English Empire. And I think this is potentially this World War III may be potentially a similar thing for the United States. It's the nail in the coffin for the 21st century China to take hold, and it's the end of the hegemonic power of the United States. Now, you keep on hearing from Putin this comparison. He keeps on saying the Nazis is, the Nazis this and all this. Now, let's be honest. The USA, and Germany during World War II were the Nazis, right? All right. What are some of the similarities and differences? If you look at language, all right, the language category, it's dramatic. All right. What about when you look at technology? What are some of the things that what are some of the things the Nazis did during World War II? They made very precise and very technical weaponry, while the United States was a little looser. All right. So if you look at today with weapons, it's the same thing that's happening. The technical specifications and the tolerances and the lethality of it are similar, but certain things could happen where it stops working very easily. And something happened in Germany with their guns. They were too accurate, and if it got too dirty or whatever, it would jam. All right. Our ships in the Navy are becoming too technological and things don't work right. So we're moving towards a similar kind of dynamic as what was going on in World War II. Now, hold on. So we'll run out of battery here. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, so if we have the weapon systems are kind of similar in a way. There was this kind of, if you look at the Eagle has similarities in addition, the idea of the internal propaganda, okay, their propaganda machine, the media propaganda machine, they're similar. What we would call the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agencies, they're intelligence agencies, intel. The way it's constructed, and not only external, which what the CIA was supposed to be, but are focused internally now and doing internal operations within the country and going against the citizens. That's similar. And this is what our modern day CIA, okay? Now, it is true that Truman signed in the act to start the CIA. Now, the CIA was kind of a spin-off from OSA, I think it was called, OSI, or whatever it was, during World War II. And then it was supposed to die off. But the Cold War was happening, and there was an act to kind of constitute the agency, the CIA agency. Well, what's the best thing to do? Make sure that you have a never-ending frickin' Cold War to justify the CIA. The CIA is a cancer in the United States, just like how the intelligence agency was a cancer in Germany. Focusing on internally, making sure there was propaganda of the war machine. Truman did not want the CIA, okay? And he stated, this is like setting up a Gestapo. And he ended up signing it because the Cold War was starting, he needed intel and strategies and all this. It was a necessary evil. But the problem is that it kept on growing and growing and growing like a cancer. And CIA is if you look deeply in this, like some of the work that, let's say, Oliver Stone did in some of his documentaries about the United States, I think you will notice that the growth of the CIA, the more powers it had, the more overreaching responsibilities it had, caused problems in the United States. It doesn't mean that everything that the CIA does is bad and wrong. It's not. But there are many occasions where the CIA caused the wars that we are in, and that their failed intelligence or their bogus intelligence led to atrocities that should have never taken place. All right, and that if we shut down the CIA, most of these problems would go away. Now people would say, well, we need to have intel, around the world, it's a dangerous place and all that. I agree with you on that. And that's why we need to destroy the CIA and reconstitute it in a much smaller and focused manner, where it's not looking at it domestically, but it's looking at it in international kind of realm, and that there's more oversight to make sure that overthrow of governments aren't happening, that there's not fake intel to get the American public to buy into a certain agenda, because that fake intel leads to wars, that leads to individuals making a lot of money in that war. Certain companies, certain people stay in power. All right. And as you're building these lies and networks of lies, and what happens is that you're building a house of cards that eventually will fall. The CIA is a big part of the problems that we have in the United States, in my mind. All right.
it needs to be destroyed. The CIA needs to be destroyed. And I'm not the only one that said this. The guy that actually signed it in to law, Truman, didn't want the CIA. And he was a 33-degree Mason. All right. He knew that the CIA was going to be a problem. And okay, it's Truman, and then Eisenhower. All right. Eisenhower didn't particularly like the CIA so much, but it really, showed its teeth with the failed coup with the Bay of Pigs during JFK's day. All right. And JFK wanted to get rid of it. Well, we know what happened to JFK. CIA has been a problem, and it needs to be destroyed. And they're tied to bioweapons. The bioweapon program is running out of the CIA, and that they are using, let me put it this way. You have a weapon system within the DoD, and you can use it as a weapons platform by the Pentagon, as part of their spectral dominance, okay, in a war setting. But you can use biologics in a covert setting, and that's where the CIA comes in. So, there are many. If you just do this at home, write a column about the U.S. and write a column about what was going on with Nazis. All right. And when Putin says neo-Nazi, you're going to see a lot of similarities between the way the U.S. government works and how the Nazis work. All right. Especially in contemporary time and the erosion of civil liberties. All right. And that you're starting to see in the news, if you say globalist, then you're a terrorist because you're against globalization. You're a nationalist. If you say something against the Fuhrer, then you should be ostracized. See, there's this groupthink that they're forcing people into. And this was the same thing that was happening in Nazi Germany. The United States needs to look in the mirror and realize that the U.S. has a lot of similarities to the Nazis. Now there are differences. They're not run by a dictator per se. Like Hitler that wrote a book, Mein Kampf, and tried to eliminate different people. That's not happening in the United States, but atrocities have happened in the United States. But there are many similarities. The way the government is working against the people that is very similar to what was going on in Nazi Germany. All right. And this idea that what the government is saying and what the government wants to do is what's going to happen instead of the government being a representation of the people. The government works for the people. The government officials are representatives of the people. But in Nazi Germany, it was the people were subservient to the government. And nowadays, especially post 9/11, the government wants the people to be subservient. And that is what Putin is saying. And Putin is more right than wrong. When you just these three categories, the language, the weapons, the eagle symbolism, the media, the intel, the way that we have our intel, there's more similarities between Nazi Germany and the United States. And I'm American, and I'm proud to be American. Like I said, my brother and father and uncles and great grandfathers and stuff fought for the country. You know what? I'm proud to be an American, but I also am educated and open-minded enough to say, you know what?
we are not meeting to the ideals of what the Constitution represents. We're not meeting the ideals of what the flag represents. We're not meeting the ideals of what this country can be for all of its citizens. But we have a government that is looking down on the population and saying, you need to be subservient. You don't want CRT? Well, then you must be a Nazi, is how they spin it. But yet the government is being the Nazi, not the people that don't want to be, America is at a point where there is this acceptance of it's more multiracial, more multicultural than ever before. All right. And to say that Americans are more racist now than before is ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. They're living in a wonderland, but they want to spin it. So if you're against the government, they're going to categorize you as a Nazi. But the thing is that it's the mirror of themselves. The government is the Nazi. All right. Biden is more of a Nazi than you think. All right. So you have that issue. People that don't want don't want forced vaccines. They make it sound like, oh, you're anti-science. Well, there's a lot of doctors out there, a lot of educated people that don't want the vaccine. They're not anti-science. They're not dumb people, all right? But they're going to say, oh, you're anti-us. So you're against the party, just like what Germany did. You're against the socialists. You're against the Nazi party. You're against America. You don't do what the government's saying, what the CDC is saying. Plus, we have all these agencies on agencies of agencies. They were very, very German-esque. We need to truncate all those agencies, especially the CIA. All right. So there's this overgrowing of agencies. That's another, there's an increase in agencies. Numbers, very similar to what was going on in Nazi Germany. So Putin is right. I'm against the advancement of Putin in Ukraine, but there is a kernel of truth of what Putin is saying about the United States. And until we actually look in the mirror and say that these are serious issues that leads to things like the Biopatriot Act and the erosion of our civil liberties. When you have a police officer going up to someone and saying, oh, you're stating your constitutional freedoms, you must be a whack job, and that what's happening is that these people that are supposed to be working for you are now viewing you as the enemy. The municipalities, the police force, the government officials, they're viewing the people as the enemy. All right. And that is Nazi Germany. When the people say no to the Fuhrer, then you're killed, or then you don't have a good social score, or you be put to a labor camp or whatever. All right. There's a lot of similarities that's going on here, and we need to stop it. This needs to stop. We create war. Noam Chomsky's right. A lot of the wars that have been created in the last, about 50 years, 70 years, have been caused because of the United States. It's not like the United States is all, for freedom. If it was for freedom and that it was pure, there was, kind of a Puritan kind of aspect to it, they would be helping Ukraine right now. They wanted they somewhat wanted either it protractive and to make money and strengthen with arms sales and strengthen NATO and just have this kind of buffer and just
this war that lasts for a little while in Ukraine, I mean, in years, in terms of years. The way it played out, if 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 we had more equipment in Ukraine, the aerial dominance that the Russians have at the moment would be seriously curtailed, maybe eliminated, maybe possibly eliminated. But we didn't do that. We could have. We could probably put an airborne, division in or whatever, we could probably put airborne division in Ukraine and seriously push back especially with the urban fighting that's going on in Ukraine. We could push back the Russians. The United States isn't doing that right now. So, it's not pure. This idea that we believe in democracy and we're going to help support democracy, bullshit. It's not that. It's not that. So, the United States is probably weaker. I think one thing learned from this is that the United States is weaker, and so is Russia weaker than we think militarily. All right, probably the United States is stronger than Russia, most likely, but I think the United States is much weaker than we project, and we're definitely not as willing to take risks as what you would expect an American country. You would expect an American country to do. Americans are risk taking, and we don't see that. I don't see that anymore. Now, there was a point that I wanted to make before I go about. I had an idea and it fleeted away. Was it Putin and Biden and I don't remember. So the bottom line is this. We have a country that is not as idealistic as you would think, all right, or you'd want. We're not this. We're going to run, and help freedom-loving countries. No. We're not even close to that ideal. It'd be lovely if we were. Ukraine right now is a perfect example. The United States is not risk-taking, and the United States is run by a bunch of bureaucrats, a bunch of paper-pushing, legalese, policy makers that aren't willing to take risks. They overthink the problem and they fuck it up all the time. All of these experts, a lot of them came from Harvard, but all these experts, that came out of the Kennedy School, all these experts could screw Ukraine up like this so quickly. I think it was self-evident that the Ukrainians were willing to fight. They didn't want the tyranny from Russia, and that all we had to do was make sure that they had air superiority. And Russia would not have engaged. Instead, you had a bunch of policymakers that saying, we're afraid what Russia might do. Yet, how many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent in war games and talks about World War III and all these experts that know about Russia. They couldn't figure out that Putin wasn't as strong as we thought. How could they be so wrong? Same thing. How could they be so wrong in Afghanistan? How could they be so wrong in Iraq with the weapons of mass destruction? See, the CIA and all of the policymakers and experts got it wrong. They all got it wrong. Or they all want it to be wrong. I don't know which one it is. I am assuming that they're dumb and that they got it wrong. Now, maybe there's a certain percentage, 20%, that was saying they want it to be wrong. But, you listen to these policymakers and experts, just roll back the clock. The same thing happened. The same thing happened with SARS-CoV-2. When you look at Ukraine, the experts kept on saying, "Oh, we got to do sanctions and box in, Russia, and that's going to weaken them, and he won't move." Yet he was willing to take a risk. See, if you use logic to try to fight a war, and someone decides, "I'm going to be irrational" as a strategy, then the logical argument falls apart. And it's kind of a chaotic event that takes place. And that's what Putin just did. Putin going into Ukraine was a chaotic event. And that all the policymakers, all these sanctions, all this stuff isn't going to mean a hill of beans, because there's ego involved. There's irrationality involved. And that the policymakers also thought Ukraine would fall very quickly. It didn't fall. And it has a chance of actually succeeding against Putin's invasion and advancement. So all these policymakers, they got it wrong. All of these politicians that are afraid to make the big decision. In the U.S., their answer was, "Zelenko, just run, just leave the country." It's almost as if they wanted Ukraine to fall, and he said, "No, we're going to fight." Yet you're going to hear you're going to hear Republicans, you're going to hear Democrats pounding their chest saying, "We believe in supporting countries that are for freedom and democracy, as long as it doesn't hurt my 401k." That's what America is. We'll support you as long as it doesn't hurt my 401k or hurt my position in power. There's not enough risk takers, and we have too many policymakers that I think are trying to do the right thing, but they're afraid to take risks and afraid to accept the fact that there are irrational actions that are actually very rational. You interject an irrational thing and create a chaotic event, and all of that policy stuff doesn't mean anything. And there was this lack of imagination. There was this lack of understanding that something could happen that is crazy. What Putin did was crazy, but it threw the Western countries off guard. All right. Same thing with SARS-CoV-2. All the experts saying it was zoonotic. There was no way that the Chinese did this. There's no way that Barrick is making bioweapons in the University of North Carolina. There's no way that the CIA does covert operations with biologics. There's no way that the Pentagon is working on chemical and biological warfare. There's no way. It's all viruses are zoonotic. There's none of them that are out in the nature that happen to be forcefully man-made and released. Lack of imagination, and the experts got it wrong. The same thing, the same damn thing is happening. Where are these experts coming from? Well, some of them are coming from Yale, Georgetown, Harvard. London School of Economics. They're not the only ones. And this is the problem. When we don't have people that are in the club calling off the people in the club, saying, hey, you're screwing up the world, then we have a problem. There are people like myself that are in the club that don't like what other people in the club are doing. Now, you may call them the white hats versus the black hats, but you have people that are making serious mistakes because of hubris, because of a lack of imagination, and because because their whole life was about logic and not understanding that there are chaotic events that can happen that are purposely interject or just naturally, a natural phenomena takes place that logic cannot predict. It's called a black swan. And we saw a black swan with SARS-CoV-2. And we saw a black swan take place in Ukraine. We actually saw 2 black swans happen in Ukraine. The first one was Putin actually invading. And, that was kind of a irrational event. What's also a black swan is that the will of the Ukrainian people to fight for freedom. How many people and I'm talking to because I have a world audience, I'm talking to the people right now in the United States. How many of your neighbors are willing to do what the Ukrainians are doing to fight for your country? I bet almost 0. But there are many Ukrainians that are willing to fight for their country and their freedoms. You know why? Because they've only had freedom for about 20 years, 30 years, 25 years, just about one generation. That's it. The Americans know nothing but comfort. Most Americans don't know about sacrifice. The far majority of the people that are living in poverty in the United States is actually living in the middle class compared to other people in other countries that are living in poverty. And that you are living in a country that if you pull yourself up, you can do a lot. All it is effort. A little bit of luck and effort. It's more effort than luck. You got to put the time and the effort in. That's what America is. We have a lot of people that are lazy and not willing to fight for its country, not willing to fight for its constitutional freedoms. And therefore, that's the reason why you have a government that's acting like the Nazis and is pushing the Bio-Patriot Act and eroding your constitutional civil liberties away because you're not willing to fight for it. And I'm not talking about doing some sort of a truck convoy bullshit. Most of the truckers cannot articulate what the problems are when it deals with the constitutional freedoms that are being eroded from this socialism that's taking place in the United States. And nor are they willing to fight for it. They're willing to honk their horn. They're willing to clog up roadway arteries, but they're not willing to fight for the country. Fighting in a war in another country in the times that we're in now is not being patriotic. Being patriotic is fighting for constitutional freedoms and telling the government to back off. That is being a patriot. That is fighting for your constitutional freedoms. But that's not what you're having. You have a lot of policymakers now that are telling you how your life should be. You have people at the CDC, you have people at the FDA, you have people at OSHA. They are, coming from elite schools, and they're telling you what to do. And you're not willing to tell them no. You're not willing to tell them no. But yet there are people within these schools that are fighting for the soul of the land, the soul of the country. Instead of thinking, I'm gonna just move into this world of Bidenism and this socialism and this world where it's gonna be a new world order. There are people within the community that is trying to fight that. But unfortunately, there's not enough of us. That's the thing, is that there's not enough of us. And that's the problem. And it's sort of similar to what's going on in Ukraine. There's not enough of them. There's not enough of them to fight the onslaught of the power of the Russian army. The same thing. The patriots that we have in the United States that are trying to fight this. There's not enough momentum against the momentum of the government eroding your constitutional freedoms, because the ones that are on the sideline are comfortably numb. They don't want to fight. They don't want to say no to the government. They don't, and they're keyboard warriors. And everyone, you know who they are. They're just the keyboard warriors that are passing links around. I'm gonna fight it's an info war. There's no such thing as an info war. There's only war. And war means death and destruction. There's no such thing as an info war. That's a bullshit term. Is war. And there's no war. Don't try to sugarcoat war. Oh, info war. And I'm going to pass an email link. No. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So that's my diatribe on Ukraine and what is going on, and the need for the country to find individuals like myself to reach out and try to roll back to what I call the pre-9/11 day. Hopefully it can be done peacefully. But unfortunately, I think agencies like the CIA, agents like the CDC and the HHS, and the government blowing up of agencies and their powers and their overreach on you is leading to a point where you don't have constitutional freedoms anymore. It's a major problem. I mean, I've had the benefit of many years of history to look at, that I lived through, and then the years of history that I learned through, other means like books and documentaries and listening to people that lived in a different era and all this. And, you put that all together, you take all that metadata and you align it to an understanding. And I had come to the conclusion that America is not all apple pie and all lily white. It's not. And we need to see the problems, fix them, and make the world a better place. And it starts with making sure that we hold truth to our ideals. And that ideals are liberty and self-determination. And when you have a government that is eroding those at the international level,
or at the domestic level, then you have a problem. And we are now seeing two flashpoints in the world: Ukraine, which is the European theater, and Taiwan, which is the Asian theater. They're coming ahead, and that if we don't, as a nation, the United States, control this and stop this advancement of China and Russia, then the United States is going to have a serious problem and lose its hegemonic power. We can slow back. By maintaining our hegemonic power, we're maintaining this Westphalian rule-based world post World War II. If we lose that hegemonic power, then that's all going to unravel, and there's going to be changing of many different countries' borders. And the sanction idea with Putin, it's the same mistake that we made with Japan. Japan was advancing their empire in Asia during World War II, and it was Roosevelt that decided to do an oil embargo on Japan to slow down their war machine. That was the catalyst that ushered in the Japanese to actually bomb Pearl Harbor. The sanctions don't work. If they work so well, why the hell are we still having the problem with Iran? If they work so well, why are we still having the problem with North Korea? They don't work. Same thing. InfoWars don't work either. I mean, I'm not throwing cherry bombs at Alex Jones, even though he probably deserves cherry bombs. But the point that I'm making here is that real war is kinetic. Real war means blood. Real war means legs blown up. Real war means homes being destroyed. Real war means death and destruction and rebirth. InfoWars, you can't fight. A real war isn't fought digitally. It's not how it works. It's in the real world, not in the cyber world. So thank you for listening. That's my take on what's going on so far in Ukraine. My prediction, because people like to ask, well, what's my prediction on this? I think that it's going to be this is an important point here, and so I'll expand on it a little bit. As Russia is advancing slower into Ukraine, they're not going to have full control. The country's too big, and there's too many people internally that are willing to fight for the country. So what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing attrition, of the Russian soldiers, and there's going to be a war fatigue that starts to set in within the Russian army, but also with the Russian people. I think that the tide is turning against Putin because the Russian people think that they shouldn't have done this. And he's losing the propaganda war on this. That's another component of it. But as he's trying to maintain some control of Ukraine, and there's this fighting in the urban setting, it's adding to the probability to what I was saying. The reason why you use biological warfare is that it's in an urban setting, so you can clear it out. So this is increasing the probability that biological weapons will be released. Biologics will be released in Ukraine. There's an increased risk of this. All right, there's an increased risk of this. And that it would be Russia that
releases them. And I think this is part of the reason why he took out at least one, or took a control of at least one of the biolabs. Because along that border, you know, it added to the probability that maybe the CIA or factions within Ukraine would release something on the Russians, but in the separatist area, in the separatist area. But as Russia's moving in and it's becoming an urban war footing kind of thing, Ukraine could turn out to be an Afghanistan for Russia again. And if that's the case, then the biologics, the risk of them being released increases greatly. And that we may be seeing the World War III using biologics. So that was an important point that I didn't make earlier. So thank you for listening. Please subscribe to all the channels, my YouTube channels, the 3 of them, Rumble, Bitchute, and Brighteon. Please share the links from Bitchute, Rumble, and Brighteon. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase the products that help with your health. I have some great products. A simple one is getting, you know, like ashwagandha to help with blood sugar levels, or resveratrol, which is an antioxidant and it's anti-aging. It helps with getting rid of senescent cells. I have probiotics that will help with, you know, proper gut health, proper gut biome, and omega-3, which is good for your cardiovascular system. Please go and try the omega-3 and, you know, improve your heart health. Cardiovascular disease can be improved by taking omega-3. That's a fact. That's the studies that prove that. All right. So, and not only that, by controlling your blood glucose levels with ashwagandha, you're reducing in that inflammatory response that causes that epithelial tissue and that endothelial tissue, the endothelial tissue in your lining of your blood vessel from being damaged and causing, you know, plaque buildup. So reducing inflammation by taking ashwagandha, reducing inflammation by taking turmeric. But please go to the store and try some of the simple products like the deodorants, the all natural deodorants that are there, or, you know, again, the, you know, omega-3, well, which helps with your heart health, or the toothpaste that helps with helps with, you know, proper oral hygiene. But over a period of time, by having proper oral hygiene, you're reducing the chances of cardiovascular disease. So, you know, I have some really good products. Please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The links are in the description of all my videos. There's no reason for you not to be able to get to the store and look at the products, purchase the products, and get onto the journey of having a proper health and slow down that aging process. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.